Welcome everyone into the Nutmeg Tavern. I thought we would start 2 minutes early because generally we start 2 minutes late. So we're trying to make up for all that lost time. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern. We are live and I'm your host, John Townsend, and we're going to be talking about 18th century medicine today, and specifically surgery and the physical part of medicine in the 18th century. Just an amazing deep topic and interesting. Before I get there, though, I do want to start off with a sad note, and that is that we mourn the loss of Dave Taylor, who has been on the live stream here, and it wasn't that long ago. Dave, super longtime friend to the channel, to our family, to the business. I've known him since the late 70s, and Dave was an amazing, wonderful character, very, very kind and generous, and was interested in so many things. Dave was one of the reasons why James Townsend and Son concentrates on the time period that we do. When my father started the business in 1973, we were more buckskin or more early 19th century, and it was Dave in like 1979, 1980 that said, you know, boy, this Revolutionary War thing is really great. You should be doing it. And he also was the person that we did the first videos with. So way back in the 90s, we did I filmed and edited, but he was the person in front of the camera that did a cooking series. And there is one of the videos online that is him doing coffee very, very early on. That's actually cut from that. He passed away this week, and just a super sad loss. He's the person who started the Blue Lion Coffee House, who started Blue Lion Coffee Roasters, who did the Blue Pearl. We've just known Dave, and it's just tough to lose him. So there are some links down in the description if you were interested in videos that we've done with Dave. But I didn't want to do the rest of this live stream without mentioning Dave. So today's topic on medicine is one that I'm working on for a nice video for the regular channel, but I thought I would kind of concentrate in. So normally what I do is I'll concentrate in on a episode on YouTube, on the regular channel, and then we kind of do a broader version here on the live stream. We're kind of flipping that upside down, and we're going deep in on one particular source because I think it's so amazingly fascinating, and there's enough here to cover 10 hours of content, and I don't know how I'm going to get it all done. But before I jump into that, I do want to mention that was it last week or the week before when we talked about the teas?
I can't remember.
Who knows how long ago? So we did the tea episode. We talked about the chocolate mint tea. We now have a full assortment of holiday teas available on our website. Blueberry tea, so good. Chocolate mint tea and maple tea that goes with that. You can buy them separately. You can bundle them all together. You can find a link just right here on the page with the video. It's a brand new thing on the channel. That's so cool. Anyway, the book we're going to be covering is called A Plain, Concise, Practical Remarks on the Treatment of Wounds and Fractures with an appendix. This is done by John Jones, a doctor and he started publishing this in 1775. There's another one that was done in 1776 and republished even a couple years after that. He was a professor at the second medical college that was in the colonies. So in 1775, 76, there were just two medical schools in what was to be North America, or the United States. And there were, at that time, 3,500 doctors in the colonies for a population of 2.5 million. That's not a lot of doctors. And of those 3,500, only 400 of them had completed any kind of medical school that you would think of as medical school. All the rest of them were either just empirics, I'm a doctor, or they studied as an apprentice, which was the most popular way of learning in that time period. So apprentice doctor. And in fact, John Jones was a apprentice to a doctor for quite a while. But then he went to advanced training in England under a couple of different doctors. Dr. Potts was one of them. And then he went to France for even more training. He graduated from the Reims School there in France. He had a lot of different instructors and a lot of different ideas. So he writes this book here, and right here on the frontispiece, it says, designed for use of young military and naval surgeons in North America. So this is kind of rare, actually a medical book written in the colonies. They didn't have a single cookbook, but they did have a book written by basically an eminent surgeon of the time. And this book is fascinating for what it has in it, because we can think of the medicine in the 18th century as just so utterly primitive that, I mean, what was even the point, right? And then, but we can find out a lot by reading an actual sort of instruction book of the time period. So here we go. Is there anything back there I need to?
Nope. People were talking about the Osage oranges in case you want.
Yeah, so yes, we've got Osage oranges just because we got Osage oranges.
The video quality does say that it's poor instead of excellent, and YouTube is giving an error and says that there might be buffering.
Okay, well,
But
we'll hope for the best. I mean,
yeah.
You could try turning down that bit rate. Remember how to do that?
Okay. Yeah, it's in settings and
Yep.
yeah.
So
I should turn it down instead.
Yeah, if you want to, you could probably go all the way down to 3,000 and see if that helps it.
Okay.
So here we go. Let's talk about what is in this book. Even the introduction, he does some really good stuff here. And he's talking about to the students, young practitioners in surgery all through all of America. He says, if any of you, by observing the following rules in the book here, should save the life or even limb of but one citizen who has bravely exposed himself in defense of his country, I shall think myself richly rewarded for my labor. In the meantime, instead of attempting an idle panegyric upon the most useful of all arts, permit me to point out to you some of the most essential duties and qualifications of a good surgeon, the proper requisites of which respectable character are only to be found in a liberal education, furnishing every means of acquiring that knowledge which must be ripened by experience and graced by constant practice of attention, tenderness, and humanity. He really is looking for doctors who not just want to find the exact answer, but actually care about the patient and how they deal with them. In most European countries, an invidious distinction has prevailed between physic and surgery. But in this part of the world, the two professions are generally united. Indeed, both the branches of medicine are, in the very nature of things, so intimately connected as to not admit of absolute separation without manifest injury to each. He's speaking here of the idea of, at the time period, there were surgeons and there were doctors of physic. And a doctor of physic or a physician was generally working on the correction of the body and diseases by drugs or chemicals or herbs or whatever. And then this whole physical side, oh, your arm fell off or whatever, you need to have something cut out of you. That was done by surgeons or surgeon barbers, as they might be called. So that was generally the surgeon was a lowly character. He was just a surgeon, whereas this doctor of physic, who's dealing with the the chemicals, they're a much more of a true doctor who's worthy of being looked up to, right? Instead of just this guy over here that cuts into people, a mere butcher. This distinction is interesting in that America, there is less of a distinction, probably because there are fewer practitioners between the two. But he actually goes into speaking to this, trying to figure out why that is true, why there's this division in the time period, and why, the two are separated. And he says, hence it will appear very evident how necessary it is for the student of surgery to make himself thoroughly acquainted with most of those branches of medicine which are requisite to form an accomplished physician. Besides a competent acquaintance with the learned languages, which are to lay the foundation of every other acquisition, he must possess an accurate knowledge of the structure of the human body, acquired not only by attending anatomical lectures, but by frequent dissections of dead bodies with his own hands. This practice cannot be too warmly recommended to students in surgery. It is from this source and a knowledge of hydraulics that they must derive any adequate notions of the animal economy or physiology. Chemistry and materia medica, medicines, are very necessary to a right understanding of pharmacy and composition. And to these should be added some progress in the mathematics and mechanics, which I will venture to assert may be applied with much more utility and safety to the science of surgery than physic. But there must be a happiness as well as art to complete the character of a great surgeon. He ought to have firm, strong hands. He ought to be able to use both alike, being ambidextrous, a strong, clear sight, and above all, a mind calm and intrepid, yet humane and compassionate, avoiding every appearance of terror and cruelty to his patients amid the most severe operations. And remember, he's doing operations without any kind of anesthetic or even very much painkillers. From this short view of the nature and extent of the art of surgery, it will evidently appear, however necessary, an early and diligent pursuit of those branches of knowledge which are to lay the foundation of future eminence is to the young student who will not find it so easily attainable as the generality of pupils are apt to imagine. In other words, it's going to be hard. But he does lay out this kind of full concept. You can't just know one thing. You really need to have all these things building one upon another. And he starts off with the idea of knowing the learned languages. And that's because most of the texts are written not in English, that's for sure, but the vast majority of the scientific texts are in Latin or they're in something like French. And so you really need to have the languages to be able to dig into the things that have been written about medicine. And they're using texts from not just whatever people have written in the last 50 years, but they're leaning on the ideas of even the ancients, right? So they're looking at some things written in Greek, or so they're really going back a long way to get their medical understanding. As to those gentlemen who will neither read nor reason, but practice at a venture, and sport with the lives and limbs of their fellow creatures, I can only with Dr. Huxham advise them seriously to pursue the sixth commandment, which is, thou shalt not kill. Be careful, even if you are just sort of, you think you can get away with experimenting. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing that with seriousness and understanding what you're getting into.
Oh yeah, you're going to give your disclaimer?
Disclaimer. As we get into the actual real application of the medical ideas here, this is for entertainment and education and not for actual use on other people. So take this as historical advice, not. I mean, there might be useful things in here. Okay, not saying that isn't true, but don't think you're a doctor because you watched this live stream. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1 of wounds in general. A wound is very accurately defined by the great Boerhaave to be a recent and bloody solution of the union of a soft part by a hard and sharp body in motion, pressed against it or resisting it. It is obvious from this definition that the subject of a wound is a soft part, and we learn from modern anatomy that the soft parts of a human body are congeries of vessels of different kinds. But they do, it's like right up front. Exactly what are we talking about? What is a wound? You know, it's not this, it's not that, it's not basically a wound isn't the bursting open of your skin from some kind of a disease, like smallpox and a little thing comes out. That's not a wound, that would be something else. A lesion or whatever. Okay. Those wounds, therefore, are mortal, which are inflicted in those parts whose cohesion is inseparable from life. Isn't that the definition? Every wound, therefore, which destroys the free influx of the blood into the heart and its expulsion from it must be inevitably mortal. For this reason, every wound of the aorta must be attended with inevitable death, as no assistance of art can possibly be applied to stop the hemorrhage. Other wounds may, if left to themselves, become mortal, but by timely help of art, the danger of death may be removed, as in wounds of the arteries of the limbs, where a tourniquet may be applied until the bleeding vessel can be taken up by a ligature. And in reports given by surgeons to judges of courts, these circumstances ought carefully to be averted to and distinguished. Many wounds also in themselves are not mortal, may be rendered so by neglect or by erroneous treatment. This frequently happens to soldiers and seamen in the day of a battle when the multiplicity of cases prevents the surgeon from paying a proper attention to all. Hence, many die of hemorrhages which might have been stopped, and extravasations under the cranium, which the application of a trepan might have relieved. Errors in practice have the same fatal consequence, persons falling into a delirium from the loss of blood, who by proper nourishing broths may have recovered. Remember, he's writing this specifically to doctors in the Army and the Navy. Basically, maybe this is a call out. I don't know if he really kind of goes into it, but a call out for triage. If you got, 5 people bleeding out and 20 other guys that, hey, they can last a couple hours, then let's take care of these bleeding people first.
It may just be him. I don't know. I kind of read it as you're like, this unfortunately does happen. Probably something he'd experienced, and knowing that the young doctors he's kind of addressing here, it's like sometimes during a war, you won't be able to get to everybody.
Exactly. There's that too. I shall content myself with, and then we're talking about inflammation now, because I'm just going to skip ahead. I mean, it's actually a very, very readable book, and it's not huge. It's not, a medical book. It's a medical book. So he's talking about inflammation here. We're in fractures now. I shall content myself with saying that irritation and pain, however they may be occasional, are all times its immediate and proximate causes that is causing inflammation, and that in most cases, if we can prevent pain, we shall proportionally prevent or at least lessen the succeeding symptoms of inflammation. So he's really pointing out the idea that the inflammation is the bad part, which we kind of know today, and that the pain is actually causing the inflammation. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but he's saying if we can prevent the pain itself, then we will lessen that inflammation. Let's see. Yes. Okay. And here we go. Lessen the succeeding symptoms of inflammation. So how is he going to deal with this? This is to be done only by the immediate exhibition of sudorific anodynes, proportionally to the age and strength of the patient and the severity of the complaint. Bleeding, gentle laxatives, warm baths, and soft catasalms to the parts afflicted will also contribute towards the desirable purpose. And here we go. Now I know you're all saying, what's a sudorific anodyne, right? Yet without premising opium, they will seldom avail in preventing inflammation. The sudorific anodyne is opium or opium derivatives, like laudanum or whatever. So that's what he's talking about. It's one of the few actual things that hit the point here in the time period. They do have opium. And I don't think he actually speaks to it here, but if you don't have that, I mean, alcohol is really your only other choice to kind of send them into oblivion. But opium is kind of a specific in a lot. It's like opium. Use that.
Although I do think he did talk at a certain point. I don't know that he delved deep into it, but they did know that people could become dependent on it. And they're like, you do
okay.
want to be careful with it. I think he did talk about that at a certain in one section. Shortly.
Right. In other cases, as frequently happens in the day of battle, when its timely application cannot be made, and when pain, continued for some hours, has already induced a great degree of heat, tension, redness, and swelling, a different mode of treatment becomes necessary. For although anodyne medicines may lessen the violence of the pain, they will not remove the symptoms that have already occasioned by it. And in this case, cooling medications, a diluting diet, and a perfectly quiet body must be insisted upon. And this is one of those situations where basically they're grasping at straws. What can we possibly do? Let's put them in a darkened room. Let's make sure it's really quiet. Let's make sure it's really cool. Let's try to bring them down any way possible. And the emotions will actually affect some of that pain, and then specifically the inflammation that is surrounding it. Now, there may be something to some of that, but we know that it's like, well, inflammation is inflammation. The other thing is, today, the inflammation might be bad, but your body does it on purpose. It's doing that for a reason.
But keeping it from going too overboard certainly is helpful to keep your patient comfortable. You don't want them to be too, trying to find the balance. You can tell they're like, it's a struggle for them. And later on, he way farther on in the book, very close to the end, he talks about hospital setups and how there had been some hospitals he'd been in where they were just too crowded, and it was not a good place for healing. So, he certainly has this concept of things that can help the healing process along. He doesn't talk too much about diet here in this area, but he does in other places.
He mentioned it right here.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things that we're going to give them, which is classic in the time period, is a low diet. Basically, we're going to give you broths, something, and I mean that's actually very good for healing. It's like you give your body something that's very easy to digest, so that it's not working on that, and it can work on, healing the person. Wounds. A division of wounds. This is in chapter 3. And, okay, I'll read this section and then we'll talk about it. The simple incised wound, when unattended with any considerable hemorrhage or great loss of substance, is always to be healed by what surgeons call the first intention, which consists in approaching the lips of the wound until they come into the most exact contact, and preventing preserving them in that situation by suture or by bandage until the union is accomplished. So if you've ever read the Aubrey and Matron series, the Master and Commander series by Patrick O'Brien, a lot of this, in fact, kind of like especially toward in the later books, it's almost all written kind of from the point of view of the Doctor. It's not first person, right? We're always outside of the character. He doesn't write first person, but the Doctor is really the kind of the main character that carries us through. One of the reasons why is because he's the alien in the naval environment, and so we get to see things through his eyes, and he asks the questions and all this stuff.
Because I would need to, like, people have said people were using naval terms, I too would need to ask them what they.
Right. It's like, what? But Patrick O'Brien, you can tell by the way he writes the Doctor and what he does and how he's treating patients and what he's talking about. He has read all these things over and over again. And he speaks a lot about this healing by first intention. So this is very simple healing. All we really got to do is close that wound up, hold those things together, and they will just heal themselves. They will take care of themselves. So this healing by first intention, or just simply closing it up, it'll be all right. We don't have to do any fixing. We might let it bleed a little bit. We might irrigate it and then close it up. Good enough, right? So he talks about that. Should any portion of it does get a little gruesome here, folks. I'm going to stay away from the super gruesome stuff, but occasionally.
We did keep skipping. Oh, you're like, oh, he's getting into detail. Nope, not that section.
Yeah. There's a reason why we're already on page 30. Okay. Should any portion of the intestines or omentum, the usual the usual parts protruded, be forced out, they ought to, as early as possible, be reduced by placing the patient on his back with his hips a little elevated, and then with a forefinger of each hand gently and alternately pressing the protruding part back into its proper place.
Right, like just kind of push it back gently.
Yeah.
Gently push it
if
back.
Some of the guts are coming out, just tuck them back in there, right? And if you can't do it with your fingers, then he talks about using this curved bistoury with a button point. Like a screwdriver, but with it not sharp on the end. So you're going to poke the thing back in shape, and then maybe you can just close the wound and it'll heal by first intention. Nope, we're going to skip over that. An implicit adherence. Oh, okay. This is speaking to, we moved into fractures, into a different part here. And he's really speaking to these guys, especially if you've trained as an apprentice and you really don't have all these other experiences. He had lots of experiences with lots of different doctors, so he could see what different people were doing, what was working in some place, by certain people might work someplace else or not. And so he's got a super ton of experience with that. And here he says, an implicit adherence to the opinions of others without exercising our own reason has been the source of that blind attachment which men in all ages have paid to the authority of names and characters. And their best understandings have been so much fettered by these shackles as to overlook the most obvious truths. And even when some enlightened and liberal minds have dared to deviate from the beaten track and boldly point out the absurdity of antiquated errors, it is with no little difficulty that men have been so long bigoted to forms and can be induced to adopt more just and rational notions of practice. Just because they've been doing it for 100 years doesn't mean there isn't a better way to do it. And if you can think of it, or if you've seen it being done, and just because it's not the normal practice, but you've seen it work, then maybe we ought to look more deeply into it. And that's what he's, directly pointing out. He's like, yeah, just because somebody with a big name says this is the only way to do it, doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way to do it.
And he's setting this stage because he's about to talk about how he has a different approach to treating the broken bones than a lot of the standard method.
Practice.
So he was prepping everybody. He's like, okay.
He's like, get ready.
Right? You have heard it different.
And so he's going to touch upon the most kind of classic of the surgeon's jobs. And that is setting a bone in a broken limb. A simple fracture. That's what we're talking about here. And, he basically points out it's like anybody can do this, right? Everybody knows, oh, well, you set a bone like this. And that is, it's like, what do we want to do? The bone is broken. It's, the limb is all at an angle or something. And we want to bring the points of the bone together as closely as possible. And so what happens here? The true curative indications in every simple fracture is to reduce the broken extremities of the bone as nearly as possible to their natural situation and to retain them there, retain them when there by the most easy, simple, and effectual means. So how can we keep that bone in the same place as easily and simple and whatever as possible? The next part of the apparatus for a fractured limb are splints. I guess he goes into the other part we're going to talk about later on. So I don't know if it's written. Maybe it's here someplace else. So one of his things, and I'll probably run into it later on, is that what can happen is that, he says the bones don't have any motive ability of their own. Everything's being done by the muscles, right? And what happens is as soon as the bone is broken, the muscles do strange things and they hold the limb. They might hold the limb in odd positions to make it hard to put the bone back, to reduce it back to its proper proper angle, getting the pieces together, right? And what the standard of the time was, say you've broken your thigh, which is the biggest bone in your body, and so it's like, how are we gonna fix that? And so they would just have like really strong men, like two hold a person's body and two hold the leg and pull it straight, and then try to, get it back into position. And that is, you've got this contracted muscle, especially with all the pain and everything. You probably haven't given him laudanum yet. He's got all this pain and the muscles keep, fighting them. And it's going to cause all this stress and strain. And so he's like, no, what you need to do is to figure out how to release all the pressure on that muscle as much as possible. So we want to bend the limbs in such a way that muscle relaxes. So you can't bend your thigh, but if you bring that knee back, or if you change the way the leg is, you will relieve a bunch of this muscle pressure, and it'll be much easier to bring the bone pieces back into where they belong. So that's one of his things, like, no, don't have a bunch of, don't do it the old way. Think about this, think about the mechanics of it and the anatomy of it, and figure out how to do it a better way. Then it's, how do we, maybe he does get here. The next part of the apparatus for a fractured limb are the splints, which are generally made of wood or pasteboard, but so short that they can only act as a compress, and that a very hard and uneasy one upon the ends of the fractured bones. It's like, why, you don't want to press right there. But as the true use of splints is to preserve the whole limb in a steady and firm position without compressing the fracture at all, they ought to extend below the ankle and above the knee with this rational view. The ingenious Mr. Sharp, one of the present surgeons at Bartholomew's Hospital, has invented a set of splints for both the leg and the thigh, which are admirably adapted to the answer of the foregoing intentions. Those for the leg are only in 2 parts in number, and they are made of strong pasteboard covered with thin leather and are fitted to the shape of the leg. and an external or fibular splint on which the leg is to rest on its side has a hole in its interior extremity to receive the prominent ankle, thereby preventing pain. So basically, they're making a hollow splints. Instead of just putting sticks around it and compressing the whole thing, they want hollow splints that basically hold the outer edges and not smash just the whole leg. He doesn't speak to the idea of we want blood flow to go to that broken part, but certainly it's like, how can we make these splints better? How can we hold that leg in a better position?
So somebody was bringing up the idea, and he does talk quite a bit about it, about needing to know the anatomy of a person and how you have to dissect dead bodies to get that. And I just dropped the link in the chat about body snatchers. Now, I don't know that he was working with dead bodies acquired this way because he studied in so many other areas.
I can't remember whether it's him or somebody else.
Yeah.
But they're speaking particularly to this. Some of the first lectures and dissections, it was a riot. People found out they were doing these things to dead bodies. They went nuts. And, were like threatening the person who was doing the lecture and running him out of town and all this stuff. And one of these doctors, he wrote like an article. He's like, listen, this is the only way to do it. And we get our bodies ethically. He didn't use that word. But we get our bodies ethically. Basically, they're paupers or they're convicted people. We don't just go pulling them out, just random people out of the cemetery, right? Unless we have to. It kind of ended like that, well, mostly, So,
but for the doctors, they wanted the knowledge so they could save people's lives,
right?
And there was a very much attention there,
right?
But they absolutely did have body snatchers.
It was a giant thing in the time period. Yep. Before I go on, I want to thank all the new and renewing members. So here we go. New and renewing YouTube members. Linda Nagni, I wish I knew how to pronounce that properly. Let's see, here's Coroso, Chris, EA Precision Builders, thank you Precision Builders, Jeanette O'Neill, Reese Van Bardwick, Mel in Arizona, Canna, and we have a brand new Patreon supporter in Logan Cavender. Thank you for supporting us so very, very directly. And speaking of directly supporting us, the purchasing of wonderful merch like super yummy teas or mugs or whatever, you're going to find links down at the bottom of the video. Do that also very directly. So thank you so much for that.
You want to pause for just a sec while I do some super chats?
Sure, go for it.
Let me get there. Okay, so this one is from Solaris. Interesting how technology and techniques once considered witchcraft is now common knowledge. And then this one's from Hunter. Did they really use a coin to cover the holes from trepanning? I don't know if he does.
He talks about trepanning, and we'll read about that if we have time, which I don't know if we are. But I can't remember whether he covers the covering.
Know that he talks about it. I didn't run across anything when we were researching this that confirmed that, so I don't know for sure.
But I can dig into that one. If you can scribble that question down.
I will.
And I can put a link down in the
That's true.
In the comments when I find that, because I'll find it. I will guarantee it.
And then here's another super chat from Solaris. One other thing is that the time between the injury and the help has drastically changed over time. So instead of you breaking your arm and somebody saying, well, I'll ride over to the next town over and get the doctor, an ambulance arrives to whisk you away.
Well, now remember, he's writing this, for every doctor, but, specifically for military doctors. And, he spoke to this already, the idea that we want to get to people as quickly as possible. And they were doing hospitals or hospital work in a mobile kind of a setting. There's directions. It's like you want to set up your immediate or like first response hospital 3,000 or 4,000 feet back from the front lines, so that the men can be worked on right away. And this is the Revolutionary War here, and also to not treat them too much. Don't spend too much time on these. Get them stabilized and move them back. So it isn't, this is a big hospital they're setting up just 3/4 of a mile away, but it is a temporary, get them stabilized and move them back to even a more stable situation. And you're hoping if you're one of those wounded people that you don't go to the real hospital, that they send you to a house, because your survival rate will triple if you're in a regular house rather than in a military hospital, just because of overcrowding and everything else that's going on.
So, Speed and Style Tony says, what did they use for sutures? And somebody else said maybe they used horsehair sutures.
He speaks to sutures, and that in here, I'm not sure that we have that circled, but they're going to be using oiled or waxed linen threads. And some other things. He really speaks directly to that. It's like, okay, here's how we're going to sew this up. You know, we've got this thing. We want the suture, the stitch to go all the way through the flesh, not just cross over the top of it and come around and bring the whole thing together. So he's speaking to all that, and also how quickly the stitches come out. So sometimes it's like they can be taken out 24 hours later if it's doing the right thing, or 2 or 3 days or whatever.
And while we're not going to read about it, he is very specific about what everything should be acting like. He goes into great detail.
Right. Now they talk a lot about laudable pus right here, and we know now that the pus is white blood cells attacking things, and that's what's going on with it, and that's generally a bad thing. But they thought, hey, that's good. Well, every wound has pus, right?
I mean, for them, maybe it was a good sign that the body was reacting.
Right, something's happening. Yes. That's good.
That they weren't. It wasn't just that they weren't. That they were strong enough to be reacting to the wound.
Right. Now we get to compound fractures. I'm going to shorten this up and basically give you a summary of the compound fracture, because we talked about simple fractures. Compound fractures, where the bone sticks through the skin, right? We've broken the skin. Compound fractures are horrible. They're horrible today, and they were horrible in the time period. And he speaks directly to compound fractures and says, well, there's 2 ways to deal with this, and that the standard of the time, especially in a military situation, was to just cut it off. That's just amputate. That's the only way to save the person, because they really didn't have antibiotics, they didn't have anesthetic, they didn't have any of those things. So how they dealt with it? But he's saying, I've been in a lot of different situations, and you can save a compound fracture. You can save that limb, but only in certain circumstances. And basically the circumstances are, where are you at? Where are you treating this person? If you're a country doctor and they're going to go back to their house, you can try. You can try to get. Now the problem is that when you try to pull it back, the flesh can close around it and keep you from pulling the bone back inside. But he talks about ways to kind of get around that. And that if you can bring that back together and close it up, that if you're in the country, then you should give it a try. And that if you're in a city practice and this is a big hospital, or if you're in a military situation and you're in a military hospital, don't bother. Cut it off, because you will never be able to save it.
Yeah, you can save the person's life if you lose the limb.
Exactly.
If they lose their limb. But if you try to save it in this very crowded hospital setting, they're just going to die.
He doesn't know exactly why. We know that there are all these sources of infection that are in this crowded hospital, and there's, they don't have any way of dealing with that. But he knows by experience in a place that is, so especially if you're like at sea, and Dr. Matron in the Aubrey and Matron series talks about this a lot. It's like, I'm at sea, I've got all this wonderful salt air, it's fresh, and air's moving through. I can heal just about anybody of things like this. because the source of infection is so lessened. But in the horrible, crowded, and just unsanitary situations in military hospitals at the time, there was just no way. There was no way a compound fracture was gonna get you through. Of course, he goes into great detail about amputations. And here is what he thinks of as why it goes bad. If we reflect upon the state of air in the crowded wards of large hospitals in the great cities, we shall easily account for the different successes which attend operations performed in such situations, from that of private practice, and particularly in the country. In the first situation, the air is not only rendered less healthy to breathe in from the great number of sick persons confined within a small compass, but the putrid effluvia arising from wounds and ulcers render it highly pernicious, and every man who has attended hospital practice in London must be sensible of the ill success which attends the operation of trepanning, even in common cases, yet the same operation yet the same operation in private practice in small towns in the country generally succeeds very well.
So I dropped into the it's in the description, but I dropped into the chat the Spanish military hospital video.
Yeah.
So we went down to St. Augustine and we filmed it there with someone who works as a docent there at the Spanish military hospital, and she does go into how they dealt with amputations, and it is just very full of extremely interesting information along with that. So
Truly. And I think here we're going to hit bleeding. With respect to evacuations, particularly bleeding, which must be always used, but with discretion, for profuse and repeated bleedings, though it may take off inflammation sooner, yet must inevitably weaken the patient too much.
I'm glad they mentioned that.
You can weaken somebody too much by taking out all their blood. Apparently, seems strange to me now, but I guess when I think about it, if you go in depth in all the parts of his book here, he talks about bleeding basically for everything, right? It's part of that inflammation. If we just suck all the blood out, then it won't swell up. Well, that's true. But maybe not the best thing ever. Now, I haven't located it yet. I'm sure it's there. But the thought is at the time that people had as much as 12 quarts of blood in them, when the reality is they didn't have that much blood. So they would take out possibly a quart at a time, and it's like they're not getting better. Do it again. That was their, and that's not joking. That is not joking. That is typical. He is one of the most learned doctors in North America at the time, and there is no situation where he says that he thinks that bleeding is bad. There's not a
maybe you could overdo it in this situation.
Right, you can overdo it. Yep.
But it's certainly something to try.
Now he talks about another doctor who thinks that maybe bleeding isn't good for concussions. But he said, I don't think that's true. Basically, he thinks bleeding might work for anything. What the heck?
Us and the antibiotics. You're like, well, let it go.
You know what? You should try bleeding. Right? The panacea, the true panacea in the 18th century was bleeding. It is not a joke. It is not a joke. Compound fracture? Let's bleed it. He doesn't even say, if we cut off his leg, maybe he's lost enough blood already.
This will keep the inflammation.
Okay. Yeah, I can skip over that one. It will also be of singular advantage to the young surgeon, particularly before they begin an operation. And this is really good advice here for a lot of different things, not just if you're going to do surgery on somebody. It will also be of singular advantage to young surgeons, particularly before they begin an operation, to go through every part of it attentively in their own minds, to consider every possible accident which may happen, and to have the proper remedies at hand in case they should, and in all operations of delicacy and difficulty, to act with deliberation and never affect great expedition, by which very capital and even fatal errors have been committed. The maximum scintillante, I'm not sure, it's hard to, since I don't have the context here, I'm not sure which one of these F's are supposed to be S's or whatever, but is in no cases more applicable than in these. It is also of no small importance to support the patient's spirit with a cheerful assurance of success and the appearance of such a degree of modest confidence as may serve to inspire him with it, and by all means to avoid terrifying him with the appearance of the apparatus and of a vain and ridiculous parade of any kind. So, I mean, this is really good. It's like, no, practice this surgery in your head a couple of times. Think about anything that could go wrong. You know, be ready with the extra parts. Be ready with, what am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do if that happens? How do I present myself to the patient? You know, we're gonna fix this for you. We're gonna do our very best. You know that, and that makes me. He talks about apparatus. I do have a few pieces of apparatus here. A bone saw, in case you need to do a little bit of that amputation. Yeah, I mean, if some doctor came up with, hold still. Keep this under a cover and don't let them see it. Right? Especially
it's bad
since,
enough when the dentist comes up with the giant numbing needle.
yeah, hold still. Because I mean, you know, you see something like this, and you're immediately going to be put off your, off your feed. I'm not ready for this. Doctor approaches you with one of these. Get ready, right? Again, don't let him see it. Don't let him see it. This isn't highlighted, but I remember this. The surgeon should choose his own assistants and acquaint them with his intended mode of operating and avoid a useless crowd of spectators. Mm-hmm. You don't need an audience, no matter how much fun they might think it is. What about concussions? Although the term of commotion or concussion of the brain has been used by many writers in a loose and vague manner as to convey very inadequate ideas of the nature of the disease, yet it is very certain that the medullary of the brain receives such a degree of injury or derangement from violent shocks. I don't know what violent shock. As sensible to impair its ordinary function. And this injury is produced without any fracture or fissure of the bone, or even the head receiving any particular blow upon it, as frequently happens in falls from considerable heights, where the shoulders, the breech, and sometimes the feet first strike the ground, and that such shocks are capable of producing not only a disorder in the substance of the brain, but an inflammation and separation, in other words, sort of like pus, in its membranes. So very interesting. They're not okay. We're getting close to the end, and there's so much more here. There's so much to learn here because in the 18th century, he speaks to the idea that basically surgery early on, like the Greeks, or, let's say, before Christ, they were mixing physic and surgery together, and the great doctors were as good at surgery as they were as physic. And that at some point, physic got to be more profitable to do than surgery. And so they basically lost the art of surgery. It just was like, well, that's not the important part. I'm going to make great money from that. Only poor people get their legs broken, right? Rich people don't get their legs broken. That's what he's saying.
Because they weren't working.
Right. And rich people don't get poked with swords, right? They're not the soldiers. Only poor people do that. And so the surgeons were a lowlier class because they were working on lowlier people. Whereas rich people, they'd have all these complaints of rich people. Oh, I've got gout. Or, I ate too much. What are we going to do about that? Blah, 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 right? So the physicians end up being the high and mighty doctors and the surgeons, the lowly. And so, he's complaining that so much of the art of surgery was lost, and yet all these physicians are still have all this ancient knowledge. But the funny part is that if we dig into the differences between the surgery that he's talking about here and the success rate and the physic that the doctors are doing, we find out that he's much closer to a modern concept and modern thinking about surgery than the physicians doing medicines were to our more enlightened thinking of medicines. That being said, right? I'm not always a fan of modern medicine like that, but that the true physic that most patients were getting in the 18th century was very truly straight up and up super poison, not just like medium poison, but basically mercury was used in a lot of different things. We wouldn't use mercury in anything today, right? And it was, a lot of their medicine was like that. It was like, so you're going to bleed them and then you're going to give them mercury and you expect to cure them, right? So it's very interesting that he is actually closer to modern concepts. Maybe it's because surgery is surgery, right? It's like, well, you cut them open, they heal. What? If we pump them full of, if we use sterile things now and we have antibiotics, we can basically cut into anybody and do anything. He wasn't able to do that, but he could kind of foresee that. If they weren't poked in some place that I can't really get into, then I can pretty much fix them, is what he's saying. He talks about trepanning. So how are we going to relieve the pressure on the brain? Well, we're going to cut a chunk out of the head. Skull, that is. Right? And I said Nutmeg Tavern, and we're in the spiked mace today. So I messed that up. Sorry, guys. Let's see. I'm not sure what this one's about. How about gunshot wounds? Got a whole chapter on gunshot wounds. Good for the surgeon. And
I'm surprised he didn't lead with that one.
Right. I mean, maybe. But okay, here's another interesting thing, and that is that can't remember whether he speaks to it or not here. But most of this is a lot of it is kind of pointed toward soldiers getting injured on the field, because this is for surgeons and for regular doctors too, but so much for surgery, for military situations. But the reality is that 90% of the people who died in the military during the Revolutionary War died of disease. They did not die of gunshot wounds or other injuries that were on the field. In some of those situations, the survival rate was much greater. It really depends on the situation. I mean, some of them are having great success. Like 75 or 85% of the guys going in are coming out again, versus straight up disease. And that was truly a killer. And you didn't have to get injured in a battle to die of disease. So that's one of the truths that's going on here during the Revolutionary War. he's talking about the first intention. Remember the first intention with regards to wounds made by a musket or pistol ball is, if possible, to extract the ball and any other extraneous bodies lodged in the wounded part. And the next object of intention is the hemorrhage, which must be restrained, if practical, by tying up the vessel with a proper ligature. So just tying off those bleeders, basically. As no styptic is to be relied upon. So a styptic would be something like alum or something that would chemically try to close up the vessels so that it would stop bleeding, but you can't rely on that. Now, there were things like, I don't think he speaks to cauterization here at all. Idea of
I did
burning
not
the
run
vessels.
across that.
Right, I'd have to search for that. But so we want to tie off those bigger bleeders in order to extract the ball or foreign body. Mr. Ranby or Mr. Dran, whose judgment and experience in these cases is certainly superior to most men's, advises little search with a probe or forceps as possible, as all irritation on these occasions increases the consequent pain and inflammation. Just don't go digging around looking for stuff. Get in there, get out. That's what I want from my doctor. Get in and get out. If a wound be of such a desperate nature as to require amputation, which is frequently the case where it happens in a large joint, or is of the utmost importance to perform the operation immediately, as the consequent pain and inflammation renders it improper during these symptoms, and when they are past, the patient is often reduced to so low a weak estate as to make an amputation a very dangerous and doubtful operation. So, don't wait forever for the person to get so weak that they won't be able to survive this. He talks about gunshot wounds being similar to burns in how you have to deal with them, and I don't have time to get deep into that one. But the whole appendix of this is about the design of hospitals. It's so important, and I wish they wish that they could have done what he suggests here.
Right. He kind of starts it off and he's like, okay, I know a lot of people are, trying to set up these hospitals as best they can, and it's not going well. And I don't really blame them. They just don't know, you're like,
right.
They don't know the correct way to go about it because they haven't had to do it before. And so then he starts to say, you're like, okay, if you need to do it, please do it this way. It will help so much.
Right. And so he goes into, and you think this is pretty enlightened thinking. And they spoke to it in that St. Augustine piece. And that is, he wants hospitals to be very uncrowded. Obviously, if you have a lot of people, you don't have any choice. You're going to fit them in the building or you're not, right? But it's like a regular person should go into the hospital and think 3 more people. For every person in here, there could be 3 more, right? Why is there this open space? That's what he says specifically. Should be a lot of space between them. It should be airy. The windows should be open. There shouldn't be any of this closed
High
window
ceilings.
stuff. We should have air. We should have light coming in here. This is all important for the survival of patients. And he's seen plenty of patients and plenty of hospitals. He knows what a healthy hospital is and what a non-healthy hospital is. They should be clean all the time. The bedding should be cleaned and changed constantly. And he speaks to this idea of using vinegar, like burning or having vinegar steam and vinegar in there. He's sterilizing things. He doesn't know it necessarily, but that's exactly what they're doing. We should keep people warm in the wintertime. The preservatives against cold consisting clothing, bedding, and fire. Winter clothing is one of the most expensive articles in a cold country, for which reason too much attention can hardly be paid to the subject. Dr. Pringle recommends short flannel waistcoats for the soldiers. They should have warm clothes. Watch coats for sentinel duty made of coarse furs. Okay. Indian shoes or moccasins, under the same circumstances, can be warmer than common leather shoes if they have a thick sole and if you cover them. So he's just like, hey, the soldiers should be kept warm. Maybe if they're cold, they will get sick more often. The wearing of wet clothes is a common source of a great many complaints, for which reason, as marches and out duty necessarily expose men to rain, they ought to be allowed fires in the rear of the camp to dry off their clothes. And here we go. To obviate the effects of putrid air arising from marshes and stagnant waters, those malaire, the encampments should be frequently changed, but if this is incompatible with the nature of service, other means must be substituted to preserve as much purity of air as is possible under such circumstances, particularly during the dysenteric season, right? When people are going to get dysentery. When the putrid effluvia arising from the discharges of the sick combine with those already mentioned render the air of camp almost pestilential. How do we keep the air clean? Of course, they dealt with malaria. Malaria was endemic in North America in that time period, and it was just a reoccurring fever. They didn't know that it was coming from, they thought it was coming from these marsh gases. Well, marsh gases with mosquitoes in them, yes. They didn't know that. Upon the first appearance of the spreading flux, the privies should be made deeper than usual, and once a day a thick layer of earth thrown into them till the pits are nearly full, when they should be well covered and supplied by others. It will also be, in other words, new ones dug. It will also be a proper caution to order the privies to be made either in the front or the rear of the camp according to the usual stationary winds, which carry off the putrid effluvia without proving offensive or noxious. And so there we go. And lastly, the utmost cleanliness is to be observed both in the persons and the bedding of the sick, whose discharges and dressings should be removed immediately out of the wards, and the floors, after being properly cleaned, may be sprinkled with vinegar, of which a large quantity should be allowed every hospital. So they are not as backward as you might think. They are thinking about cleanliness. They are thinking about keeping air good and keeping air moving and sunlight and all that good stuff. It is part of what they're doing. Yes, they might bleed you for everything possible, but it's not as bad as what you might think. Gruesome, yes, but I mean today's stuff is gruesome too, right? If we saw behind the scenes, and it's like watching surgeries online on YouTube, you just couldn't get any more gruesome than that.
I do have a couple more super chats. So this comes from Solaris. Is there an account of the weirdest situations that people have gotten themselves injured? And in this book, I think he only told 2 stories, but somebody chimes in, and Lord Frederick chimes in with this story, and he says, there's a story from Martin that said a guy was juggling his musket with a bayonet on it, and it slipped and stabbed him through his thigh. So there's a story.
Well, and there was another in Joseph Plum Martin where he was taking a small tree, and he was bending it down and swinging back and forth. So it was like, boing, like a pole vaulter, right?
Kind of like for the fun of it.
Right. He was just having fun. They were having fun. And he smashes his knee on like a tree stump or something really hard. Just goofing around. Stupid. He was 18 or whatever. He was just a kid.
Yep. So. Yeah, he learned there. He learned a lesson.
I limped for the rest of the war.
Here's a super chat from XR Cool. Good health to all in the tavern.
Yes, certainly. One of the things we can be super thankful of is that number one, we have people like this in our history that we're working hard at progressing the medical field, and that he cared And he wanted to care for people as best he could. And we have plenty of medical professionals that are that way today. And we can be super thankful for that. Somebody asked about the fruit here. Osage orange, also known as the horse apple or a hedge apple. Inedible, but interesting looking. And they look like brains if we had a close-up picture of it. And they're not really useful for anything. But the trees are really
I hear
good.
that they scare away spiders.
Yeah, so well, there is that.
And they smell nice.
They do have a interesting citrus tone to them, kind of like a sweet citrus note to them. And the wood is really good for fence posts and bows, for making bows and arrows.
Okay, I've got one more super chat from Stinky Water. The Nutmeg Tavern makes me want eggnog in celebration of you guys going live. I will get hammered. Love you guys. And we're right. We've just entered into eggnog season. It's
We have
just gotten cold
we're
enough.
finally in the eggnog season. Well, November maybe.
Well, it's cold enough now. It's cold enough to really start enjoying the honey.
Well, I am enjoying the blueberry tea at the moment, and it is super good. Just, Ivy had to do a bunch of packing of the teas, and it's just the smell of all that tea. It's just wow, good stuff. Anything else?
We're all set.
We are all set. Incredible information. This week's video, I think it's bacon pasties. They were really good. So, and easy to do and fun. So make sure to check that out. I don't know what else to say. Really want to thank everyone for your encouragement. And when I start working on topics like this, it's just so interesting. It's such a rabbit hole to fall down and learn so much. So I am truly fascinated by the progress that we're making, the scariness of it, and the resilience of the people that had to undergo that. I can't imagine being a soldier in the Revolutionary War and knowing that if I got sick or ill, that was the kind of medical care I was going to have to live with or die with, more likely. So all the more reason that we should look at their courage and their duty to, it's like knowing the difficulties that they were going to have to, not only just like what was the medical care like, but what was their clothing going to be like, and what was their food going to be like. I'm sure if they knew all those things, not a single person would sign up. It's like, let me tell you beforehand what's going to happen. It's like, are you crazy? Anyway, thank you so much, everyone who is here encouraging us. And so many people do, like whether it's in the comments or maybe I'm at an event and people come up and I get lots and lots of encouragement. I don't know very many people who get the amount of encouragement that I get because of this particular situation. So I am certainly blessed by that. So thank you for your care of me in the comments section and supporting us in all the different ways that you support us. It's just so amazing, the people that reach out and help us. I want to thank Lauren and thank Ivy. I hope you folks have just an incredible weekend. It's going to be, it's fall. Fall is the best time of year, really it is. So go out there and enjoy the weather. I hope you have a great time, and I want to thank you very much for joining us on this day's live stream.